Hi there. The second plenary session of the 13th Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference kicked off today, marking the start of China's political season this year. How shall we review the work of the CPPCC in the year 2018? What will be the new targets in 2019? And in which areas are we likely to see more breakthroughs? To have a closer look at the CPPCC agenda this year, I'm glad to be joined in the Beijing studio by Mr. Zhang Weiwei, Director of the China Institute in Fudan University. We shall also have two CPPCC members sitting with us today in the studio. They are Mr. Vincent Mo, the Board Chairman of Fang.com, and Mr. Jia Qingguo, a professor from Peking University and member of the Standing Committee of the CPPCC. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. This is the Voices and the Votes, a special edition of Dialogue on Lianghui 2019. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to our discussion here, gentlemen. I'd like to start small on a discussion about a wide range of big topics, such as Pinyin, like Lianghui. Instead of talking about the plenary 2 sessions, I would prefer to use Pinyin Lianghui. Does that mean anything special for overseas media or people like you guys, members of the CPPCC? Or Professor Zhang may have your own unique and always very independent perspective?
Actually, I prefer gradually introduce more Pinyin because they are really unique and they are also the annual fixture of certain events. So we say Lianghui, Lianghui. Eventually, outsiders will know what does it mean. It means 2 sessions of the People's Congress and the CPPCC.
Professor Jia looks very serious. You put a lot of face. Do you disagree? Or?
I think it's very confusing to use Pinyin in this kind of situation because, you know, the CPPCC itself is a very complicated
like
subject already, and then you put together with NPC, and then you make it into Pinyin Lianghui. It's really very difficult for people to understand.
You mean it's detrimental to the branding of CPPCC, or are you afraid that China will be increasingly viewed as assertive in using Pinyin?
No, it's not a question of using Pinyin or not using Pinyin. I think it's a question of trying people get the idea of what's going on, rather than use a particular concept.
But Vincent, I'm afraid that overseas media, particularly foreign correspondents in Beijing who have long lived and worked in Beijing and other cities in China, must be very familiar with the political vocabulary in China, such as Lianghui or 13无14无15无 the 5-year plan for years. Don't you think so?
Well, Lianghui is definitely a well-known name among Chinese people, but I prefer 2 sessions instead of Lianghui in talking about this.
Why do you show your loyalty to Lianghui? 2 sessions.
Well, Lianghui, it's frankly it's too Chinese. It's very tough to spell out the letter by letter. But 2 sessions is much easier. 2 sessions is already something. Overseas people need to work out to find out the real meaning of 2 sessions.
Well, let's look at the agenda that's delivered by a spokesperson of CPPCC at the beginning of the political season in the year 2019. He came up with a number of big issues, such as U.S.-China trade talks, relations, democratic consultation on mobile domain, promoting private sectors, BRI initiative, poverty alleviation, Greater Bay Area, development, AI development, medical reform, cross-strait relations, environmental protection, so on and so forth. You have dozens of such issues on the agenda of CPPCC and perhaps on NPC, the top legislature. What do you think are the issues that appeal to your mind and heart most?
Interestingly, both the spokesperson and the Chairman Wang Yang this afternoon mentioned the kind of innovation or innovative work in CPPCC. I was struck a bit by this bi-weekly consultation and also the use of APP among the members of the CPPCC. They look at this bi-weekly consultations. The very first session of this consultation for this year is about AI. It's about AI and how it should be linked with real economy, not virtual economy. So this kind of CPPCC is engaged in cutting-edge technology and its implications for Chinese economy, for China, and for its own work. So that, for me, is fascinating.
First and foremost, we have to make clear what the CPPCC actually stands for in terms of the initials. Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. Sounds pretty complicated, like a sound twist. But I'm afraid you are referring somehow in the understatement of your response, the idea of how to promote the efficiency of political participation through the use of APP. But what is the issue you think is more important for you?
I'm a professor of international studies, so I'm more interested in how to manage China-U.S. relations and China-U.S. trade dispute, for example. So this is the stuff I've been focused on. But of course, I'm also interested in a number of issues that have been mentioned by the spokesperson. I think CPPCC is a good platform for people to develop various kinds of ideas, come up with different suggestions for policy innovation and change. And it's a place where people can talk to each other and then talk to the media and then somehow try to get some kind of a consensus on some big issues.
The U.S.-China relationship, don't you think we're going back to a Cold War?
Well, I think at the moment the relationship is not in a terribly good shape, to put it mildly. But I think we are not going to the Cold War. We are not in the Cold War at the moment. I think there was only one Cold War in history, and that Cold War was between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. And if you look at that Cold War, it has three characteristics. One is ideological confrontation, ideological rivalry. The second is military confrontation. The third is economic isolation. If you measure by those indicators, then China-U.S. relationship is far from getting into a Cold War. We have some ideological differences, but not rivalry. We have some military frictions and disagreements, but we are not in a full-scale confrontation. We have some trade disputes, economic differences on economic policies, but we're not in a state of decoupling or economic isolation.
Well, one of the things that may have caused widespread worries on both sides, Chinese and American alike, is the importance of the private economy, small and medium-sized enterprises. You come from the old China Federation of Industry and Commerce. You are a member, a representative of this very important walk of life. What do you think of, or what are the issues that you consider most interesting for you?
Well, definitely the private sector or private companies is something I'm very interested in. All of us now, in the past 1 year, 2 years, there were different talks about the private sector, like 国进民退, and like 公私合营, all of these discussions in the past. And last year, November the 1st, President Xi Jinping held a very important talk or meeting with 52 entrepreneurs, 52 business owners.
Were you one of them?
I'm one of them, and I was in the meeting. So President Xi emphasized how important the private sector has been and will be in China's general economy. I believe it's from the top leadership of China. They really believe private sector is a very crucial sector of everything. China's general economy, China's social life, and they can play a very important role. Not only important, you cannot just ignore that role in China's future. So that's the background. So that's why I'm interested in this topic, and also it's the I think one of the most important topics on the list for these two sessions. So.
Well, Professor Zhang, Professor Jia, and Vincent, obviously, what helped China kick off the process of opening up and modernization, crucially, was the normalization of the ties with the United States 40 years ago during the Carter administration. And many on both sides, particularly on the Chinese side, argue, in most likelihood, a sharp decline in the bilateral relationship with Washington would conspire to lead to a sharp, if not the severing the diplomatic ties, decoupling Chinese market, because China is accused of being assertive and industrial espionage, government-sponsored 2025 5G or digital leadership. With that put into your perspective, Professor Zhang, are you cautiously optimistic or pessimistic about the most important bilateral relationship, and in other words, the most consequential bilateral relationship?
No, in fact, I think Sino-US relations are extremely important for both countries, and two countries, to my mind, are already so much interdependent. If you look at the figures, the trade volumes between two countries increased over 230-fold in the past 4 decades. Every day, 14,000 individuals traveling between the two countries. So there's no way to decouple this relationship. Yet, I agree that within the United States, there is a faction you may call the right, the extreme faction. They want to do that. They want to decouple the relationship, but they cannot
extreme
succeed.
faction somehow represents bipartisan consensus in their crusade against China.
I think gradually they will realize it's simply humanly impossible. Yeah, the United States will suffer from. It will be bad for both sides. To my mind, the United States will suffer more. That's my consistent view.
President Trump disagrees with you seriously. But what you say may be viewed as a fake news by him.
I agree with Professor Zhang that we have very important stakes in our relationship. And I think it's in our best interest to maintain a good and stable relationship between the two countries, especially economically. However, things can go bad if the relationship is not managed well. Okay? Some instance, now we talk about interdependence. We have a lot of shared stakes. We're not going to the extent of decoupling or economic isolation. But it's always a possibility. Okay? Just imagine, with the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei CFO, and then the Chinese government reacted by arresting some American CEOs in China, and then the U.S. retaliate. That could touch off a chain of negative reactions that will quickly lead to economic decoupling.
With the bilateral
so
relationship.
we need wise leadership and responsible leadership to manage this kind of situation.
Vincent, do you think the Chinese authorities have exercised utmost restraint in handling this most consequential bilateral relationship? For example, we have not adopted an approach of retaliation. Taking you as an example, right? Your efforts of merger and acquisition in the U.S. market may have created many American jobs. Do you think U.S. government will have to take into consideration the proactive efforts by Chinese entrepreneurs to help economic integration between the two biggest economies?
I think the Chinese government, they have been handling the case very well. And the current situation between U.S. and China, I think it's really getting to normal, a new normal. Think about 20 years ago, it's completely different relationship. And now we talk, we fight, and then we talk again, we fight again. So this will continue in the coming 20 years or even 50 years. So U.S. side has recognized China as somebody he has to talk, he has to negotiate, and sometimes, of course, there are conflicts there. So this is, I think, the current situation is probably the best situation in the past, 30 years or so. We are getting to a new normal relationship with the U.S. side. So, as an entrepreneur or business guy, having business in the U.S. and in China, I think both sides we're still talking, we're still investing and thinking about the grow business in both countries. Really, I have not facing some very tough challenges, or extreme challenges. There are extreme things there, but I think it's normal. We should.
You mean the United States government has been very selective in singling out the targets?
As we are discussing CPPCC, CPPCC are essentially made up of leading experts in China of various walks of life, various fields. They compare the quality of decision making, its process and its decisions. The Chinese leadership is by far much more sophisticated and with a long-term vision than Trump administration. That's my view. If you look at this tariff war, I say it's laughable. If you look at the 25% tariff on how many billions of goods, even Trump did not know what kind of product will be put into it. He tweeted already.
Stock markets and reactions from the stock market will let
Actually,
you know
if you look at the Chinese reaction, it's much more measured and prudent. Yeah.
Then what do you think of the outcome of the possible Mar-a-Lago summit meeting, the second of its kind, between President Xi Jinping and President Trump to help apply the finishing touches to the negotiations that may really say something about the tariffs?
I think the current negotiations are moving on well. We have agreed to on some very substantive issues, differences already. So they are working on the summit at Mar-a-Lago, probably in mid-March. At the moment, they're working very hard.
Trump will walk away, as what he did here. No,
I think the chance for him to walk. I mean, you cannot rule out the. You cannot rule out the.
Well, probably
the
President Xi who will walk out.
but the chance for them to have a meeting and then to cut a deal is pretty high at the moment. But of course, this does not mean that we are we are not going to have other problems. Actually, other problems may as serious as.
Let's look at other issues on the agenda of CPPCC. What do you think of the #1 circular, 中央1号文件, every year without exceptions to talk about the plight and poverty elevation for farmers in disadvantaged underdeveloped areas? Are you hopeful, Vincent, that farmers will 99% Chinese farmers will enjoy a complete alleviation of poverty?
I think it's very hopeful, and I believe in this. China is a socialist country, and alleviation of the poverty is definitely is probably the #1 most important.
Bread and butter issue.
Yeah. So the government and the party and the government leadership, they have been very keen to have this done in 2020, actually less than 2 years from today. It's a tough job, and there are so many, population, number-wise, comparing to the whole world, other countries. It's really a big number of people who needs to be alleviated from poverty situations. The central government and the party is very determined to do that, and every level of government, including public sector, private sector, and the state-owned enterprises, everybody is in it.
You are probably right that the political will of the central government in China may have been underestimated time and again by overseas observers, in particularly realizing the avowed goals such as reducing poverty. Professor Zhang, I'd like to ask you, China is getting old very quickly. Aging population is fast becoming a top issue. other than financial risks or systematic financial risks. So that might be listed as one of the three major concerns on the agenda of President Xi Jinping. A third concern could be environmental protection. So let's look at the medical reform, Medicare for the elderly generation and retirees. Will that be a serious drag on the Chinese economic sustainability?
Yes, many people now discuss the issue of the elderly care. The Chinese view is quite dialectical because we think this is a problem, but it's also an opportunity. So gray hair economy is now very much in fashion. It's a lot of opportunities to develop as an economy. So I look at this latest proposal by the the Reform and Committee, which about cooperation with Chinese state-owned banks, and then they invest into whether private or state-owned enterprises which want to do this elderly care jobs. So this is a huge initiative, and also state-owned enterprises will have their 30% of their profits go to the elderly care and other social causes.
By the way, Vincent, do you think you're going to invest more in the development of nursing homes, special properties that may look after the retirees, pensioners, and the aging part of the population?
Well, number one, there is a huge, big potential there, and there is also a big problem there we're going to face going forward. And number two, we do need to rethink this topic. China, our history, and it's different. The relationship among families and among family members is really different from the U.S. or other Western countries. In the U.S., it's normal to have a elder house there and the care house there, but in China, it's going to take some time for us to accept this concept or the way of dealing with this problem. So that's number two things. So number three, based on this, I'm not quite agree with Professor Dang. I think it will happen, but it's going to take probably 20 more years for us to change our culture. So that's a very different thing.
And also, I think it will soon, from my mind, will really this population policy. Now it's 2 kids. Eventually, soon I think there'll be no limit. That's another way to boost new population.
Ironically, in first-tier cities such as Shanghai, you see negative growth of the population despite relaxation of the family planning policy. The other issue, I'm afraid, is last July, Politburo of the CPC Central Committee had a very important landmark meeting emphasizing the importance of the stabilization in 6 sectors. 6稳, employment comes first, finance, foreign trade, foreign investment, and expectation. How to manage public expectation. How embarrassing is the issue of employment in the job market? Because this is not only an economic issue, it could be a political concern for politicians, particularly for the sizable population and the huge market, huge economy of China. So, Professor Zhang.
Actually, if you look at the figures for employment, it's not bad.
I raised this question in the context of the downward economic pressure.
I remember Premier Li Keqiang said he is concerned with always 2 issues. One is inflation, where it goes up or it's very modest. The other is job creation. On both fronts, China is doing well, so far so good. But it's tremendous pressure. For this year, every year, 8 million college graduates. We have to create about 12 million jobs every year. We did that last year, and this year, with some effort, we'll achieve this goal.
Professor Jia, do you think most university graduates would be found jobless the moment they graduate from the campus? And that's also your concern as a very veteran senior professor in Peking University.
We don't have this problem in our university.
Of course, you have the glow of the ivory tower.
This is a big challenge for the country, for many universities. But I think the government has paying a lot of attention to this and has develop various kinds of policies to first, you try to create jobs for the young people, fresh graduates from the colleges and universities. Second, I think you try to encourage the young people to set up their own companies, to set up their own business. So Li Keqiang has been Premier Li Keqiang has been pushing for 大众创新、大众就业、
Massive
大众创业
innovation, massive entrepreneurship.
I think these are very good policy, very good ideas. I think a lot of people, more and more young people, are doing their own business now.
But what about, say, the angel investment, private equity in the situation of economic severity? I'm afraid that's the chilly economic winter at this moment. Vincent, are you optimistic that we're going to have more funding for the young university students who want to run their startup companies?
Frankly, it's a very challenging question, and employment is definitely the key of the general economy and the social stability, definitely for sure. But currently, we are facing a big challenge. I've heard some numbers with the contract for the next year. This year's graduate, it's not really, it's not that good comparing to the years before. Number one, general economy is not good. We are under pressure to keep the growth rate. So that's one. And secondarily, we are reforming the benefit and the tax system for enterprises. Actually, the existing enterprises companies still under big pressure to hire more people, to maintain the current people, because formerly they may not need to pay for in the benefits or tax. And since January 1st of this year, and it's transparent, every company needs to pay all of these benefits and the taxes. It's a big burden for the private sector.
I'm afraid this policy has been suspended, overlay.
Well, it's suspended for the past. You don't trace back what you did, before January 1st. But from January 1st on, as long as I know, the new policy is going to implement. Actually, China's policy, benefits and tax policy, it's very tough policies. So there are many discussions about that. So those two pressures are hanging there. So with what you just talked about, how much money from venture capital and other funding, sources, I think I'm not quite optimistic about job market, for the new graduates of the college and the universities for 2019.
Now, something probably we also need to do is to reform to revise the labor law.
Yeah,
to encourage our business to hire more people. Now the current labor law restricts the incentives of the private business to hire more people.
Well, very quickly, by the end of the program, very quickly from each of you, are you hopeful that political participation in China will be enhanced instead of reduced due to the growing confidence of the ruling Communist Party?
Well, I think that's why I prefer to call this Liang Hui, because it's a fixture of Chinese what called consultative democracy, which is working well. If you compare Chinese approach to consultative democracy with the Capitol Hill there.
Not competitive democracy, but the consultative democracy.
And with the Brexit referendum, our model is better.
But you guys are members of the CPPCC. What do you want to say?
Well, I think this is a good vehicle for us to improve our policy and develop a better future. But then it depends on two things. One is, freer, discussion and deliberation of ideas, exchange of ideas. The second is, the increased importance attached to this kind of, process on the part of the government. So,
Vincent, your take.
I'm optimistic, and in one way, there is a lot of Chinese characteristics, policies, politics we need to stick to. On the other hand, and the door is opening wider and wider for us, like as a member of CPPCC, to advocate or to propose, things to.
Right, indeed.
To
the political participation, broad in size, shall not be underestimated. I'll see you next time, the same time tomorrow for Voices of Votes. Goodbye.